G'day, legends. I hope that you're having a fantastic day so far, a fantastic weekend, and that you are looking after yourselves. Now, firstly, thank you for all the support on my latest video. I do really appreciate it. If you're unaware, I'm going to have a surgery in under 2 weeks, as well as then 12 months of chemotherapy following that. I still need to speak to the oncologist about the particulars of this, but I'm so appreciative to have you guys. And look, what I'm going to do, because I'm trying to put some money together just because I don't know how much I am or am not going to be able to work, but I also try and get you guys a bit of a bargain. So I've actually put up 2 auctions on eBay. They're starting at 99 cents, so $1. I've got my old medical pack that I wore around bloody everywhere. You can buy this if you want. It comes with a soft stretcher, admin panel, all the medical stuff, whatever. If you want to buy that, go for it. As well as my old 24-hour assault pack. If you're interested in any of this, 99 cents, pay the shipping, have it. I'll put the links down below. And hopefully someone actually uses it. Don't let it sit around your office like I have been since I got out of the army and got fat and lazy. Anyway, legends, today we do have then a lot to speak about. So we need to look at the maps. We need to update you over the last 48 hours because I was lazy and missed a video yesterday, but we do have some significant changes. Of course, we need to look at Kursk. We need to look at what Ukraine's general has said about Kursk, what the situation is on the maps, and geolocated footage. We'll also look at geolocated footage in other areas and other areas of the map that are moving, and there is some significant movements. We need to look at the US and future financial military support, to Ukraine, military aid, as well as the UK with those long-range strikes. But where I want to start is with a commonly spoken about piece around Ukraine's victory being the collapse of Russia, and that is the way that Ukraine will then seize a win, seize a victory in the war, that it's not through battlefield wins, it's through then a collapse of Russia. And we've spoken a lot about this, but look, I'm just using this post as a guide due to I see a lot of people sharing very similar opinion of this. Now, there's Andrew. He is a prominent blogger speaking about Ukraine. Again, I'm just using this as a guide because a lot of people then share this opinion. I want to talk about it. Imagine living in 2024 and believing Ukraine needs to push Russia back in order to win the war. Soon it will be 2025, and there will still be people who believe this for some reason. So what he's getting at here is that Ukraine will achieve a victory in this war through a Russian collapse. Now, many people thought this earlier on, including myself, that is realistic, that, hey, look, Russia, these are unprecedented sanctions, the amount of military support going in, and then throughout the war, it does actually seem like, well, those unprecedented sanctions, Russia was unprecedented in the way that they were able to negate around those sanctions and find other markets. And the longer that goes on, probably the less impact they may actually have. It's sort of medium term, so short term, not that much impact, medium term impact, but long term, other markets, if you're selling oil, gas, coal, people are going to buy it, whether it's through intermediaries or whether countries who are like, I just don't give a shit, will buy it anyway. And as well with this, the Ukrainian 10-point peace plan, number 5 and 6, to do with territorial integrity, this, in my opinion, still relies on military victories. Yes, the US, EU, NATO, their economies are much, much larger. Like California has a larger economy, I believe, than Russia. But what we need to look at is the appetite for further support here too. Yes, they're larger, but we are seeing that the appetite, in my opinion, is reducing, and we have sort of found where are the stops on support. Okay, Ukraine pleaded for tanks, they got tanks. They pleaded for aircraft, they got aircraft. Pleaded for long-range strikes. I think that's where the butt might be stopping. But in this too, what we need to assume is, okay, the rate at which Russia is having losses on the battlefield currently, and the cost of that is on offensive action. What then occurs if they sit in defensive? It's going to take far less shells, far less equipment, far less men to do that. Ukraine is still going to need to fight through those areas. So in my opinion, I don't see any way in the future, if Ukraine's goal is Crimea, Donetsk, the 1991 borders, I don't see any way here that it's going to just be this constant withdrawal. The Russians will wear down. I believe the longer this war goes on, it may actually get easier for the Russians as they move, as we have seen that front line exponentially moving. So it has been moving, but actually moving faster as Ukraine does run low on manpower. And in this, it is then a question of who will break first, who will survive the longest. And in the way that it's going at the moment, I would have to say that at the moment, Russia is moving one way at exponential. Russia is, in my opinion, meeting their loss rate with recruitment. Ukraine is, I believe, not meeting that recruitment, and we do know there are severe manpower shortages. And of course, it's going to rely on how America feel here. And this opinion isn't just formed off thin air. It's things like Tatagari UA, and I've shared this a couple of times now, but he was ex-Ukrainian serviceman. Some Western analysts mistakenly assume Russia has already failed in Ukraine, believing Ukraine just needs to maintain its pace until Russia is exhausted. This ignores the risk of internal crises in Ukraine and Russia offsetting its demographic losses with occupied territory. So the longer this goes on, the easier it actually may get for Russia. So I believe there's no way in the future, if Ukraine has that goal, they need to massive mobilize, they need to risk everything, and they need to push through, attempt to push through those defensive lines. I don't know how that will, of course, go. I don't have a crystal ball in front of me. But anyone who says, well, how are the Russians fighting better now than they were in the beginning? Well, this is known. People shouldn't be, if you have military knowledge about Soviet tactics, you shouldn't be surprised by this. NATO relies on having a really strong NCO corps and fighting great from the beginning, but if you have incur a loss, it's incredibly hard to replace a corporal or a sergeant. That takes 5 to 10 years, at least in the Australian forces, to do that. But straight off the bat, you're capable of all this, but having large losses, then there is problems on replacement, where the Russians work very opposite. The Soviet system is you have a lot of fuck-ups in the beginning, but throughout then a protracted war, that experience gains, and you sort of get this proxy NCO corps develops from people that have survived the fights and experienced and fight better throughout. I can show you the doctrine if you'd like. Actually, I'll do a video separately on this about you shouldn't be surprised that the fighting is better. And most people are saying protracted attritional war. Now, you need a bit of a hybrid of both. You need that professional force, NCOs, to conduct the offensive pushes and move around the battlefield, but you also need an ability to just attrit down forces too in a protracted war. I hate that term, but there is no surprise to people that understand the doctrine that the longer it goes on, the Russians will actually improve their fighting capability. We knew this from doctrine well before this through Soviet eras too. But I want to speak about the ability to continue supporting and the appetite for this as well. So the UK, we know the US and the UK, mainly the military aid of long-range weapon systems to Ukraine. US has said no. So sort of reach that stop of where is the line of what they'll give to Ukraine. And the UK, they have also now said no. So the Prime Minister's spokesman told reporters no war has ever been won by a single weapon. And there's no chance in the government's policy on the use of long-range missiles. So there's no changes in this. There's other ways that we're going to support Ukraine. So Ukraine's request for Storm Shadows to fire into Russia looks like it has been denied in the UK as well. We know the UK was relying on the US to say yes, and the US said no, and now the UK has said no as well. And of course, Keir Starmer puts up things like this, glory to Ukraine today, and always, this is one of the things that I'd be, like if I was Zelensky, I'd be like, this is, you say shit like this, you're with you for this, no matter what, but you won't then give us the strikes too. So we know there is a limit. This is not this idea of there's no limits friendship here as well. And I wrote down something as well about the NATO rhetoric here. About the rhetoric about Ukraine is that it's existential for NATO and the EU. But the actions of the NATO and the EU do not reflect this, and that is absolutely true there. Now we need to look at what Speaker Johnson has said more about further funding to Ukraine. Of course, we know then in April that's $61 billion, but he has said with Punchbowl News, I think this was from, I don't have an appetite for further Ukraine funding, and I hope it's not necessary. If former President Trump wins, I believe that he actually can bring that conflict to a close. I really do. I think he'll call Vladimir Putin and tell him that this is enough. And I think everybody around the world is wary of this. And they want it to be resolved. I think, and I agree, I think a lot of people are, okay, this war's been almost 3 years now. We need to find some solution to this. And of course, that solution, we don't know where that would end. But we'll look at the maps and it may give us a better idea. So whatever the terms are, I'm not sure. But I think if Kamala Harris is president, I don't think it ends. And that's a desperate and dangerous scenario. So look, you need to take a bit of emotion out of this, regardless of which side of the fence that you are on. I think in the future, if Trump were to win and end the war, there could be a case where people look back and go, thank God he did that. Because if Kamala gets in, Kamala is already in power. So do you think that the support to Ukraine, the military aid, potential boots on the ground, do you think any of that is going to change? No, it's going to trickle in the same way that it has been going for the last 2.5 years. And in my opinion, without a massive increase in this, without a massive increase in support, what's going to happen? It is going to continue, like Tatagari UA said, at the same rate, and it will continue and actually be a worse place in the future. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, nor am I trying to influence you which way to vote. Go with your heart and what your brain tells you. Now, this is from the new NATO chief, Mark Rutte. NATO allies should not and do not listen to saber rattling by Vladimir Putin because the alliance is strong and can respond to any threats. That is what he has said to Sky News. Now, there is, well, I'm sort of wrong here, but there is a response to nuclear weapons, but there's no good response to nuclear weapons. And with saber rattling and that escalation ladder, this is something that the US absolutely needs to take seriously and assess. Now, does that mean that, we need to then bomb this or do this? No, but if there is a threat there from a world leader who has the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, if there's a threat there, saber rattling, it doesn't mean that you don't assess it and go, he's taking the piss, but it means you still need to take it seriously and assess it. And by not listening, like he says, that means not assessing. And there should always be an assessment of how serious is he for this. And saber rattling and strikes, this does not just mean nuclear weapons. I think people are so focused on that. You shouldn't be. Well, you should be to a degree, but you shouldn't be too focused. Things like escalation into then Iran and its proxies, into Africa, things like this, that is realistic. That is happening. That isn't saber rattling. We have seen an increase in the ability for, let's just say, the Houthis. We have seen an increase in their ability. Where do you think that's coming from? Iran. Where has the main relationship grown with Iran and a country that could give them higher end systems? Not listening, you still need to assess this. So it doesn't mean it should influence your actions, but you should bloody listen to it. Maybe not some of the EU countries, but the US absolutely needs to. So Mark Rutte, I believe he was, Norway's leader, I believe, or Netherlands? I think Norway. This is not as important, I guess, for EU countries as the US. The US is the unipolar power in the world. They have bases all around the world. They have extensions, octopus arms going out in every little corner of the world to maintain that power. They do need to look at influence and where countries are moving all around the world, especially like in the Middle East, like we spoke about, and that BRICS, of course, challenging that unipolar power and dominance there in financial systems. So I get it from, this is like when Estonia or Lithuania talk that let's sending this, sending that. It's different for you to assess this as it is for America. America has no friends or allies. They have strategic interests. Yeah. Read Henry Kissinger. Read, bloody name. I've had a brain fart. Oh no, it's already happening to me. Read Christopher Hitchens. They hated each other. Read both of them, and I reckon you get a good scope on some world politics around some of these bits and pieces. Again, it actually strikes me that the absolute vast majority, some would say up to 80% of NATO's power, is the US. But of course, the US isn't the leader of NATO. But in a wartime, it would be by default. Let's have a look here. So, of course, we have Ukraine in the center, the capital of Kyiv, the areas occupied since 22, the purple since 2014, the green and blue areas that Ukraine has pushed Russia back out within its borders, and the blue, of course, up in Kursk is where Ukraine is occupying parts of Russia. Now, we need to push back up into here, of course, Sudzha, Kotonovo, areas of which you will be familiar with. We've missed a couple of days here, so we will go through. So, we see on the 9th, and then to the 11th, we do see this push in through Lyubimovka and this area here coming into grey zone. And then we move up to the 11th and we do see a reduction. Sorry, just look at Glikovo. We see then a reduction in this area 2. So we definitely need to talk about Kursk. There are changes up in here. Again, I don't really use the deep state map because it hasn't really been keeping up in here, but let's look at what then General Syrskyi, leader, of course, of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, has then said. We know that about 50,000 soldiers from the other directions were transferred to the Kursk direction. Of course, this made it easier for us to conduct a defensive operation. So what he's saying is that Russia has moved 50,000 troops from other areas in the front into Kursk to try and push Ukraine out of Kursk. Now, a couple of things here. Did Russia then take the bait? What Ukraine was trying to do in Kursk was make Russian forces leave other areas of the front line to go into there so it's easier for Ukraine to conduct defensive and offensive operations there. Last week, only a few days ago, we were getting signals from Ukrainian officials that Russia started ZAP offensives. So down in areas like Kyiv, right down in here, that they were conducting offensives. Now we're hearing that 50,000 troops have moved into here. So is it that? Has Russia finally taken the bait for this? Or is it Ukraine trying to justify the Kursk offensive? There's so much criticism about this now because it seems that it has justified other areas. Is it further justifying this going, if we start losing a bit of ground here, Russia's deployed 50,000 troops into here. That's why we need to maybe pull back out of here. So a bit of column A, bit of column B, maybe, but we are seeing definitely advancements in here. Or potentially Russia is going, we're trying to return this territory before the US elections, because if then Trump gets in and there's a negotiating table, if Ukraine doesn't hold that bit of ground, that is a significant card off the table for Ukraine at the negotiation if that were to take place, if Trump were to get into power. So I think it's a bit of what I have said in there, but let's actually have a look then at what these changes actually then are, and some geolocated footage as well. So this can be a little bit hard to look at, to get your sort of mind around, because it's the flipped opposite of what we are typically looking at. So let's have a look at Glashkovo down in here, where we saw that grey zone push back today. Now, this map down in here, this is then Glashkovo, and the other areas, Vasyole, in here. So what you can see, you can just look at where the border shape is in here, that it is saying that similar-ish to where this grey zone shifted, that Russia has been able to push then Ukraine back in this area. Now, let's come across just a little bit and we look at Lyubimovka, Sverdlikovo, Korenovo to get an idea of where we are. So this is Korenovo in here, and what you can see, so what we want to be looking at is, ignore this bottom part, we're looking at just at this top part at the moment, where Russia is said to have pushed back. Now, have a look at Snagos through here, Lyubimovka. We can see that if we take this tree line, it's showing that Russia has pushed into this area in here. We take this intersection, this is going to be important, this intersection running just in here, that Russia has returned a lot of the territory in and around this sort of piece that's coming out and over. So that is what Syriac map is showing. Then we'll come onto the eastern side and we have Borky and Ulinok. Now, this is where we're looking now at this bottom part. So we look at Ulinok. The easiest part from these maps, because it's satellite imagery, look at where the tree lines are. We're not going to get it exact, but you'll get it close enough. See these tree lines that are like fingers? Well, these are the tree lines like fingers. In this area right in here, this is where this map is showing, at least this map being Syriac's, is showing where the Russians have pushed back. So significant advances pushing back on this area in the Kursk region. Now, let's have a look over, well, actually, I'll show you this footage first. So this footage here, this is of Russian infantry fighting vehicles moving down this road. As you can see, moving upwards from this T as they move through here. So where I will show you this is then the geolocation for this. You'll get an idea. This is Lyubimovka. So let's have a zoom in and I'll show you Lyubimovka, and this is where we see it. So this T that the Russian forces are moving in this direction, where my cursor is going, this direction down here. So we'll get more of an idea of what is occurring in this direction over the next coming days. The Ukrainian situation in Kursk is deteriorating. Following the start of the second phase of the Russian counteroffensive in the Oblast, the Russian army has managed to drive Ukrainian forces out of many of their positions taken in August on different axes, retreating towards the border again. The replacement of the experienced brigades by defence forces and reservists has made it impossible to contain the Russian pressure exerted since September. Of course, the figure of 50,000 troops on this front is nonsensical and illogical, considering the difficulty of the Ukrainian army is already having to maintain its positions on other fronts. So if Ukraine is already struggling in Zap, in Pokrovsk, in Zinkivka, in Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar, to say that 50,000 troops have moved away and this is still moving, if that is true, it actually paints a worse picture than if it is not, if that makes sense. The new Ukrainian reinforcements leave for Sumy in response to contain the Russian advance reinforcements that, on the other hand, are needed elsewhere, which indicates that the Ukrainian non-withdrawal from Kursk is due only to political reasons after its certified military failure. Ukraine currently controls less than 600 square kilometres, so a lot of ground from that, about 1,000 at one point, down to 600, and there are more and more reports coming through Russian pages, so grain of salt, but that a lot of forces are leaving then Kursk back into Sumy. So let's get a further look again on this front, and what we're looking at is, of course, down in this is Korenovo, so you can see these towns, and moving further out. Now, like I said again, have a look at the tree lines of where this is, so you get this area here that Russia is occupying. They're taken back because this is their territory, taken back these areas in here, as well as further out. If we have a look at where this tree line runs down in here, then out into some of these fronts as well. They are having then successful offensive actions back in this front as well. Now, it doesn't say it in this one, but one of the maps does say, it might be in the next one, Ukrainian army is withdrawing to the town of Suja. The Russian army has entered these areas and is approaching from Bukovka in the direction of which we showed you. Reports about the arrival of Russian forces in Sverdlovskovo are not correct. So that is interesting to take in. So saying that a lot of forces here are pulling back into Suja, but that they are not in Sverdlovskovo like people are maybe suggesting. That this would be important if the Russians were able to get in Sverdlovskovo. But what we did see is fighting vehicles moving south on this road down in here in the direction of this. So we'll keep an eye on everything occurring in here over the next coming days. Now let's push down into, let's go into Toretsk. So let's come down in Toretsk. Here we go. Now we'll skip back to then yesterday. We saw, let's have a look forwards. We saw grey zone yesterday, then red out to the west of New York, push up to today, and we have further red zone in around Nepelivka. Remember that this front is where it shows a lot different around two different maps in here, including other Ukrainian maps. But we do have some geolocation that I want to show you in here as well. So Toretsk, right in here, we see where this road runs up. Just in here, we can confirm that this is where the Russian forces are. But remember, other maps are saying that most of this area down in here has come under control as well. But the reason we know the Russian forces are there is we do have further geolocations, and I'm showing you this to show the destruction as well of Toretsk. There's unbelievable destruction of this area, but of course, like we heard from Ukraine, that they're fighting at every door. There is significant fighting in here, significant destruction, fabs, all of these pieces of equipment being brought into the fight and continuing the push through here. This is more footage, I believe, from a Russian GoPro or phone, and you can just see the level of street-to-street fighting and level of destruction. How much longer is the fight for Toretsk? I don't know, but it does seem the advancement through a built-up area like this compared to like Bakhmut is a lot faster than it was a year and a half ago. So we don't have a map update there, but remember this will Surak was saying the Russians are in Leonidivka, and to the south, it basically cuts all through here. Remember, we'll get a better idea into the future. Now, let's look at Pokrovsk, and I do have a couple of updates and a couple of geolocations. So let's step back to then yesterday. So we see some of these changes. We see just now in Krasny Yar, of course, pushing further to Minograd, as well as, oh, that's the only one we had yesterday. That's all right. Then we'll push forward, and we've got three here. So one out near Hostre, and then the other town here, I can't read through the red there, Ostrivsky. We'll talk more about this, as well as further push towards Minograd, Pokrovsk as well by this map, as well as in the north, then filling in more of these gaps by this map. Now, let's firstly look around this area before we go down just that Hostre front and the problems that that is having. So again, let's line these maps up. This is Seledove. This red dot is Seledove. Remember, the flanks are the most vulnerable piece in here, up from Tashkerne. So we can see an advancement up the train line on then the flanks by the Russian forces, as well as on the northern flank. then a further push out this red dot is Lysivkia. So Russian army made new advances inside the locality of Lysivkia here. In addition, Russian forces continue advancing south of Seledove, approaching the last southern supply line of the town and the locality of Vishnev. So this area in here, again, it'll be interesting to see the envelopment and maybe fortifications defense of Seledove. This is a very major area in here for then, if this fills up, the ability to then push into Pokrovsk, but also the ability then to push south on the Kurakhove front, which we will now look at here, which is very important. So this is the advancement in here. Now, this is being shown across multiple maps. Although Hostre itself is shown as grey, Syriac for a number of days has shown that Hostre is under Russian occupation. But we can see that into this area here, Ostrivsky, that both maps are showing that the Russian forces have pushed into here. Now, the difference is this map is showing grey, where Syriac is saying that they have taken full control over the locality and they're less than a kilometre from the first houses of Kurakhove. So Kurakhove here, that they're less than a kilometre from here. This is an important piece. Now, Kurakhove itself, we do know the Russians are softening this up. Like I said the other day, for the first time I saw that the Russians were using TOS-1 Alpha thermobaric, their flamethrower, on this area. We see that because very short range, it's highly vulnerable. Russians don't have that many of them considering, but we see that used before. Then we see the sort of armoured and infantry assaults into areas. So that is a sign that Russians are going to push on this area soon, at least what I believe. But you can see the salient in here getting built more and more up between Hernik and Kurakhivka as well. So I believe this is probably not that far off, and then less than a kilometre. Let's give that a quick measure. It really depends where you go from, I guess, to the first blocks maybe, but the town itself is more like 5 clicks. So let's have a look and we get a bit of an idea about some of where these assaulting forces are. So we have Ostrivsky, and just here, so just on, see where this road turns down, just around here, this is the geolocation of then this Russian armoured assault into this area too. Again, I won't show you all of this, but we can see the assault moving along and eventually the armoured vehicles then dropping off the infantry and working in Hostre itself. I believe what this would have been is, like we've seen the Russians been doing recently, they have those lighter assaults, motorcycles, bloody e-scooters, fucking whatever, into an area, and then they use that as a way to lever in and use a larger armoured assault. That is something that we saw Wagner PMC develop, and of course that has been then grandfathered into the forces, and people love to take the piss out of all these motorbike assaults. This has got hit, this has got hit. Yeah, I get the photographs of, guys dying because of this. Is that working on the front line? Yes, it absolutely is, because there is advancement in very important areas, although these areas very quickly will become non-strategically important. So let's have a quick look at some other areas now where I want to push into, where Ukraine has pushed Russia out. So in here, Kamyansk area, Stepnohursk area, people watching me for a while knows I delivered firefighting, Jaws of Life and other tools into these areas. Bunch of fantastic guys at the fire stations in here. And we did see that Russian forces were on the other side here. They got smashed by drones, and here it shows that the Ukrainian army expelled the Russian forces from this area in a counter-attack. It's going to be very, very difficult to get any foothold anywhere across water, bloody, regardless of who it is or what it is also. So let's have a little bit of a push up into the north, and Syriac map has given a breakdown. And this is very classy, I will say, of himself. Hats off in Seversk, and an apologies for a mistake that he made. Apologise for the mistakes made in the elaboration of Kursk front. Can I not read? In Seversk front this week, relying on the Russian Ministry of Defense and videos resulted in a representation that was far from reality. I received a slap on the wrist by my contacts who know soldiers in that area. The Seversk front continues to live up to its name by having well-trained Ukrainian troops who have held positions on that front for 2 years. It is true their situation has worsened significantly since the summer, gradually retreating westward. But it is still premature to say that the front will unblock. We know even Russian forces talk about how good the defense is around Seversk. One of the threats, I think, here is that the well-trained troops and the good fortifications here could be jeopardized by the movement, potentially, of drawing these troops out into other areas to attempt and 2, potentially stabilize other fronts that are moving and progressing westwards or northwards. So let's just move up a little bit. Now, here we have this Andreevka Jezerne in here. Now, this is the wrong thing I clicked on, but this is something we need to line up here, where it is said to have then a Russian advancement. So when we have, I can't even tell because it's not labeled, this town in here, and it said that Russians have had an advancement just to the south in here. So this dot is Andreevka. I think this shows under control on here. But anyway, the Russian army took full control over this Myazorivka. And I think if we zoom in, yeah, so he's saying the Russians took full control over this area in here. Appears to be fairly minor, but maybe the red has just shifted in there today. And then we need to look up, and there is one advance that I believe is very important, is Kupiansk-Sinkivka here. Now, not shown across this map, so again, grain of salt. But we then see there isn't a Russian advance in here according to Surak Maps. Surak Maps is very reliable, I will say. The Russian army made new advances south and east of Sinkivka, taking control of the first streets of the locality of Petropavlivka. So this is Petropavlivka right down in here, signified by this blue dot, but of course the streets and locality comes right out in here. The best way, again, is to have a look. See this tree line hooks around? It's right about where my cursor is, and further out to the east of Sinkivka too. We know Russia had a lot of failed attacks trying to sort of break out of Sinkivka. This is showing, though, that the Russians have managed this. If this is true, so let's say it's right about here, again, it's not going to matter 100 or so meters for what we are speaking about, but really the first areas of Kupiansk then are within a few kilometers. If we move back and we have Kupiansk itself right on that sort of 10 Ks, I would not be surprised if we see Russia get more of a foothold down in this area, an ability to bring in TOS-1s. If there was to be further assault, I think we may see them bring the TOS-1 Alpha in against Kupiansk. As we do know, they have been taking down bridges in here with missiles and FABs launched into these fronts as well. So, said to be that gain. I actually believe that gain could be the most significant overall in this, and somehow waited to 30-something minutes to show you, legends. I hope that you have a fantastic day. If you're going to go chuck a dollar bid on my used packs that I carried around, they're in great condition. But anyway, look after yourselves. Have a fantastic day, and I will speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.